Meet Corbin, a 64-year-old retired teacher who spent most of his life at the front of a classroom, guiding young minds. He was always the picture of good health, or so he thought. Corbin had a routine he followed without question. Every morning, without fail, a steaming cup of coffee was the first thing he reached for. It was more than a habit. It was his comfort, his wake-up call to the day. He'd tell himself that it helped him stay sharp, that it kept his energy up, and that it was a part of his daily ritual. But lately, something didn't feel quite right. It started slowly at first. A bit of fatigue that lingered longer than usual, a little lightheadedness when he stood up too quickly, and an occasional ache in his chest that he dismissed as just stress. But then, one day, while out on his usual walk around the neighborhood, Corbin felt a sharp pain in his chest. His breath became shallow, his heart pounded unnervingly fast. It was more than just a little discomfort, it was a warning, one he could no longer ignore. His daughter insisted he see the doctor immediately. The doctor's words hit Corbin harder than the pain itself. "Your cholesterol is through the roof," she told him, "and your heart is showing signs of strain. Have you considered your coffee habits?" She didn't have to say much more for Corbin to know that his daily cup was more than just a treat. It was a ticking time bomb he had been sipping on for years. The doctor explained that some of the very things Corbin thought were helping him stay healthy were, in fact, quietly wreaking havoc on his body. It was a harsh realization, but it also sparked something inside him. If he wanted to keep enjoying his retirement and be there for his family, he needed to make a change, and fast. This journey didn't come easy. For weeks, Corbin struggled with the idea of giving up his beloved coffee. He tried to replace it with other drinks, but nothing gave him the same sense of comfort. It wasn't just about the caffeine, it was about the ritual, the warmth, the peace it gave him in his mornings. But with each passing day, as he began to read more about the impact of coffee on seniors, especially those with high cholesterol and heart risks, the urgency of his decision grew clearer. Slowly, Corbin embraced new habits, changing his diet, his coffee choices, and even how he thought about food. He began to understand that the right kind of nutrition could help protect his heart, his brain, and even his legs, things he hadn't given enough thought to before. Now, as Corbin's transformation continues, he feels a renewed sense of vitality. He's not just feeling better physically, he's experiencing a shift in his mindset. The fear that once gripped him about aging has been replaced with hope. His journey is a reminder that even the smallest changes can make the biggest difference. And for Corbin, it all started with making smarter choices, especially about the coffee he drank every day. It's a lesson he's learning, one sip at a time. Corbin sat in his favorite chair, the one by the window where the morning sunlight poured in. His coffee cup was in hand, the warm steam rising as he stared out at the quiet neighborhood. It was a ritual he'd cherished for years, this time to himself before the world fully woke up. He had been feeling a bit off lately, a little more tired than usual, but he brushed it aside. It was just the stress of retirement, he thought. It was the quiet after decades of teaching, the sudden stillness that felt almost unsettling. But this morning, as he sipped his coffee, something felt different. A tightness in his chest caught him by surprise, and he found himself pausing for a moment, taking shallow breaths. He didn't want to make a fuss, but the sensation lingered, and with it came a small voice in the back of his mind that said, "Maybe it's time to listen." Later that day, as he recounted the feeling to his daughter, her face tightened. "Dad, you need to see a doctor," she said, her tone firm but caring. She had always been the one to keep him grounded, to make sure he wasn't too stubborn to seek help. After a bit of gentle nudging, Corbin agreed, albeit reluctantly. It wasn't until he sat in the doctor's office, waiting for results, that he truly began to grasp the severity of his health. The doctor's words were blunt. "Your cholesterol is much higher than it should be, and we're seeing signs of strain on your heart. Have you ever considered your coffee habits?" The question was simple, but it hit him like a brick. Coffee? He had always thought of it as harmless, a little boost to start the day, something that kept him sharp. Yet, here he was, with a medical warning he hadn't anticipated. The doctor gently explained how certain types of coffee could elevate cholesterol and blood pressure, leading to long-term heart problems. As Corbin sat there, stunned, it felt as though the floor had dropped out from under him. Could his beloved coffee be the cause of all this? It was a question he had never thought to ask. That night, as he sat at the dinner table with his family, Corbin couldn't shake the conversation with his doctor. His daughter, noticing the deep furrow on his brow, asked if everything was okay. He shared the news with her, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I never thought coffee could be a problem," he confessed, his hand subconsciously gripping the edges of his plate. She looked at him with concern, but also with a sense of calm, the kind of understanding that only comes from someone who truly cares. "Dad, you've been drinking it for years. Maybe it's time to make a change. Just a little one." Her words weren't harsh, but they carried a weight that made Corbin pause. Could he really change something so integral to his daily routine? The thought of letting go of his morning cup felt foreign, like losing a piece of himself. But as the evening wore on, Corbin realized that sometimes the hardest changes were the ones that mattered the most. The next morning, he set his coffee cup aside, taking a moment to breathe deeply. It was the first time in years he had done so without the comforting warmth of caffeine in his hand. The first few days without his morning coffee were harder than Corbin had anticipated. It wasn't just the absence of caffeine that unsettled him, it was the loss of the ritual. The quiet time he had always cherished, that simple joy of sitting by the window with a cup of coffee in hand, felt like something was missing. Each morning, Corbin found himself staring at the kitchen counter, unsure of what to reach for next. It wasn't until his daughter came over that afternoon that the shift began to feel more real. She'd been worried about him. He hadn't mentioned coffee at all in their conversation since that doctor's appointment. Sitting down across from him, she smiled softly. "So, how's it going with no coffee?" she asked. Corbin sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I miss it, a lot more than I thought I would." She nodded in understanding, but didn't press him to change his mind. Instead, she gave him a small bag of organic green tea. "Here, try this. It's soothing, and it has some caffeine, but much gentler on the system than coffee." Corbin didn't know what to expect, but he trusted her judgment. The next morning, he brewed a cup, the smell of the tea unfamiliar but surprisingly pleasant. As he sipped it, he noticed something subtle. There was no sharp jolt of energy like he was used to with coffee, but there was a calmness that settled over him. He wasn't sure if it was the tea or just the quiet of the morning, but it felt different. His body didn't feel the same level of strain it usually did after his coffee, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a little lighter. Corbin decided to read up more on how different types of coffee affected seniors. The more he learned, the more it made sense. He was surprised to find that many of the things he'd been drinking for years weren't as benign as he thought. The flavored creamers, the instant coffee mixes, even the decaffeinated varieties, all had hidden ingredients that could slowly harm the heart, kidneys, and overall health, especially as you age. One study he came across showed how some coffees, particularly those with artificial sweeteners or unfiltered methods, could raise cholesterol levels, something Corbin was now all too aware of. He never thought about coffee in such terms before. All he'd ever focused on was how it made him feel in the moment, the warmth, the boost, but never the long-term consequences. The idea that his daily coffee was silently working against him was a hard pill to swallow. But Corbin wasn't ready to give up on the ritual entirely. He began experimenting with different coffee alternatives, slowly discovering healthier options. He found that organic, medium roast Arabica coffee seemed to be gentler on his system and even better when brewed with filtered water. Each cup felt a little less harsh on his heart, and he wasn't experiencing the same spikes in energy or heart rate that he once did. It was a small change, but it gave him hope that he could still enjoy his mornings without sacrificing his health. The transformation wasn't just in his beverage, it was a shift in how he thought about the food and drinks that fueled his body. Corbin realized that taking care of himself wasn't just about avoiding the bad things, it was about finding the good and embracing it fully. The more he learned, the more empowered he felt, and this was only the beginning. As the days passed, Corbin's mornings started to feel a bit more settled. His decision to swap coffee for organic tea or filtered Arabica wasn't just about avoiding the risks he'd learned about. It became a deeper journey of rethinking his entire lifestyle. With the absence of his usual caffeine rush, Corbin had more space to notice the subtle shifts in his body. He no longer felt the jittery bursts of energy that used to accompany his cup of coffee, nor did he experience the late afternoon crashes. It was strange, but in a good way. He felt clearer, lighter even. And as he walked around his home, noticing how his steps felt more purposeful, he realized something else was changing too, his outlook on life. One afternoon, Corbin took a walk through the neighborhood, a route he had walked countless times before. As he passed his neighbor's house, a familiar face waved from the porch. Janet, a woman in her late 60s, had always been one of Corbin's good friends. They had spent many afternoons chatting over coffee, sharing stories about their families, their pasts, and everything in between. Today, as Corbin waved back and approached her porch, he couldn't help but notice a difference in himself. The conversation they had felt different, lighter, more engaging. As they talked, Corbin mentioned his recent health scare and the changes he was making in his diet, including cutting back on coffee. Janet listened intently, nodding as Corbin shared the science behind why his doctor had recommended the switch. When he finished, she looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said softly, "I've been feeling that way too. Maybe it's not just the coffee, maybe it's just how we've lived our whole lives, pushing ourselves too hard, thinking that coffee or sugar is the answer to everything. It's like a constant noise, isn't it?" Corbin realized that Janet had a point. The constant urge for more energy, more stimulation had been a part of his daily routine for so long, he hadn't even noticed the toll it was taking. His decision to slow down and change his habits had set off a ripple effect. Janet, who had been skeptical at first, was now rethinking her own choices. They sat there talking about how small changes could lead to big improvements, both in their health and their quality of life. It wasn't just the coffee, it was their entire approach to aging, to life itself. That evening, Corbin's family gathered for dinner, and he could feel the positive energy from his conversation with Janet still lingering in him. His daughter, noticing how much lighter he seemed, asked, "So, what's next? What are you changing now?" Corbin smiled and shared his growing realization. It wasn't just about the coffee anymore, it was about taking better care of himself, making mindful choices about everything he put into his body. He was learning to embrace whole foods, getting more vegetables into his meals, and drinking more water. The journey of change, though small at first, had become a powerful shift in how he saw himself and his health. Corbin had started by addressing one seemingly insignificant habit, his coffee. But as the days went by, he found that change had a way of snowballing. His energy was more stable, his mood lighter, and he felt more present in his own life. It wasn't about denying himself comfort, it was about finding a new kind of balance. And in that balance, Corbin found something precious: peace. Peace with his choices, peace with his body, and peace with the way he was choosing to live the rest of his life. Corbin's new routine wasn't always easy, but the changes began to feel less like sacrifices and more like small victories. He had always been the rock of his family, the one who made decisions quickly, but now he was learning the importance of taking things one step at a time, embracing each small shift as a win. It wasn't just about his health anymore, it was about setting an example for the people around him. At the next family dinner, Corbin shared his progress with his son, Will, who had been skeptical about his dad's drastic coffee change at first. "Dad, I'll admit I didn't think it would work," Will said, his tone more respectful than usual. "You always swore by your morning coffee, but now, seeing how much more energy you have, I can't help but think maybe I should take a second look at some of my own habits." Corbin smiled, glad that his son was taking notice. It wasn't just the physical changes. Corbin's clearer, calmer demeanor was having an impact on his family. His daughter had noticed it too, the way he seemed to be more engaged and less fatigued. One evening, as they sat around the table, Corbin's wife, Claire, chimed in, "I've seen the shift in you. You're more present. You're not rushing through everything anymore. There's more joy in the little things." Corbin wasn't used to hearing such compliments. Over the years, he'd focused so much on being the provider, the father, and the teacher that he'd forgotten what it felt like to take the time to truly appreciate life. The little things, like his morning walk, a cup of green tea, or just the laughter of his family, began to feel like treasures rather than interruptions to his day. The most significant change, however, wasn't just about how he felt. It was about how he looked at his health, how he looked at his future. Corbin realized that after years of simply getting by, he had the power to influence the rest of his life, especially in his senior years. He had a new sense of control over what he put into his body, control over his habits, and most importantly, control over his mind. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about making big, dramatic changes all at once. It was about taking small steps each day to preserve his health and, in turn, his happiness. As Corbin continued on this journey, the family rallied around him. His daughter would often send him articles on healthy recipes or new studies related to senior health. Will took it upon himself to set up a weekend routine for their morning walks, encouraging his father to join him for a light walk every Saturday morning. It wasn't just about keeping Corbin healthy, it was about keeping the family strong together, supporting each other in ways they hadn't before. One Sunday, after a family meal, Corbin sat back in his chair, feeling an unfamiliar sense of calm. He wasn't thinking about the next task, the next goal, or even the next coffee. He was simply content. His family had become his greatest source of support, and they were all in this journey of change together. He realized that this was just the beginning. His decision to change his coffee habits had sparked a greater transformation, not just in his body, but in the way he approached life itself. Corbin wasn't just feeling better physically, he was learning how to live in a way that nurtured every part of his being. His family's encouragement fueled his progress, and with every step forward, he felt more connected to them and more connected to himself. As the weeks went by, Corbin's transformation started to feel less like an experiment and more like a new chapter in his life. He was learning to appreciate the simplicity of daily routines, the way his body responded to clean, natural foods and drinks, how his energy levels remained steady throughout the day. There were moments when he'd catch himself smiling for no reason at all, just from the feeling of calm that had replaced the constant noise of his old habits. It wasn't just the coffee or the food choices, it was the overall way he was starting to live. One Saturday morning, Corbin woke up early, something that used to be a rarity. He had always considered himself a bit of a night owl, but lately he found that he naturally woke up with the sun, no longer needing to rely on coffee to jumpstart his day. That morning, he brewed a cup of chamomile tea, something he had started to enjoy as part of his evening routine. The warm, calming beverage felt like a gentle greeting to the day, a stark contrast to the sharp, bitter coffee he once relied on. He stepped outside, breathing in the cool morning air, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive. As he walked down his street, Corbin realized that this shift wasn't just about his health, it was about reclaiming control over his life. The subtle changes he had made in his daily routine had opened up space for him to reconnect with his own body, with his family, and with the world around him. He wasn't rushing through life anymore, running from one thing to the next. He had learned the power of slowing down, of listening to his body's needs, and of making small but meaningful changes. One afternoon, Corbin sat with his daughter in the living room, enjoying a homemade smoothie filled with spinach, berries, and almond milk. She had been encouraging him to eat more vegetables and plant-based foods, and he had started to see the value in them. "I feel better than I have in years," Corbin admitted, taking a sip of his smoothie. "My energy is up, and I don't feel that tightness in my chest anymore." His daughter smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "I'm so glad you're doing this, Dad. It's inspiring to see you embrace these changes." Corbin's new habits were slowly becoming a lifestyle, something that felt natural, sustainable, and empowering. He no longer felt the constant pressure of trying to keep up with unhealthy habits. Instead, he was learning to prioritize his well-being, and in doing so, he was giving himself the greatest gift of all: peace. It wasn't about striving for perfection, it was about finding balance, about making choices that honored his body and his future. His family continued to be his strongest support system. They celebrated his small wins, from his improved sleep to his ability to walk longer distances without fatigue. Will, his son, had started joining him for walks, and sometimes they would talk about life, family, and the lessons they had learned along the way. Those moments became more than just physical exercise. They were opportunities for connection, for sharing stories, for strengthening the bond between them. The change in Corbin wasn't just physical, it was a shift in how he saw himself and his future. He realized that, even at 64, he had the power to shape his health and his happiness. He wasn't bound by the habits of his past or the expectations of aging. He was creating a new version of himself, one that was stronger, more mindful, and more grateful for the simple joys of life. And as Corbin sat with his family, enjoying a quiet evening, he knew this was only the beginning. He had started with a small change, the decision to give up his beloved coffee, but it had sparked something much bigger. His health, his relationships, and his approach to life had all shifted. And in the process, Corbin had rediscovered the joy of living fully, without the constant need for quick fixes. The best part? He knew that he was only getting started. It had been several months since Corbin first swapped his daily coffee for healthier alternatives, and the change in him was undeniable. What began as a small decision, replacing one cup of coffee with tea or filtered coffee, had rippled through every part of his life. He had gone from simply trying to feel better to genuinely thriving in his day-to-day activities. The tightness in his chest that used to worry him, the waves of fatigue that drained his energy by noon, and even the little aches and pains had faded into the background. One afternoon, Corbin was sitting on his porch, the sun dipping low in the sky, when his neighbor Janet came over for a visit. She had been following his journey and wanted to check in on how he was feeling. As they talked, Corbin shared how not only had his health improved, but his mindset had shifted too. "I've realized that all the little things I used to do to get through the day, like that cup of coffee in the morning or that snack to keep me going, I've been doing them out of habit, not out of real need," he confessed. Janet nodded thoughtfully. "It's funny, isn't it? How we often live by routines that don't serve us, just because they've always been there." Corbin had come to understand that the changes he had made were about more than just avoiding certain foods or drinks. They were about shifting his relationship with his body. His coffee wasn't the only thing that had been comforting him. It had been the stress, the quick fixes, and the distractions from deeper, more lasting habits. He had learned that wellness wasn't just about eating better or getting more exercise. It was about listening to his body, honoring his needs, and finding peace in the present moment. That realization was perhaps the most important part of Corbin's journey. It wasn't about chasing some ideal version of himself. It was about accepting who he was now and taking steps to care for that person. His daily walks had become a time for reflection, a way to clear his mind while also strengthening his legs and lungs. He didn't feel the need to push himself to the limit anymore, and the pressure to keep up with others faded away. Instead, he focused on what felt good, what nurtured him, and allowed himself to slow down when necessary. His family continued to be his biggest cheerleaders. Will, who had initially been skeptical of Corbin's decision to give up coffee, now saw the results firsthand. "Dad, I've never seen you so relaxed," he said one evening as they sat on the porch together. Corbin smiled. "I feel it too," he replied. "It's like I found a new rhythm. I'm not racing against time anymore." Will agreed, noting that he had begun to incorporate some of Corbin's healthier habits into his own routine, like making more time for family meals and choosing whole foods over processed ones. Corbin's journey was about far more than just one cup of coffee. It had opened the door to a fuller, richer life. He wasn't just extending his years, he was enhancing the quality of them. The weight he had once carried, the worry over his health, the constant battle against time and aging had lightened. He had found a new way to live, one that wasn't defined by limitations, but by possibilities. As the months rolled on, Corbin embraced his transformation with gratitude. The aches in his joints were becoming less frequent, his energy remained steady throughout the day, and his mood was more balanced. He still enjoyed a cup of coffee on occasion, but it was no longer his go-to, and certainly not in the amounts he once relied on. He knew now that it was all about balance, about knowing when to step back and care for himself, and when to enjoy the things he loved in moderation. In the evenings, when his family gathered for dinner, Corbin realized that his transformation wasn't just a personal victory, it had become a collective one. His decisions had influenced his family's choices too, and they were all learning, growing, and improving together. And in the end, that was the greatest reward of all, knowing that the path he had chosen was one that would lead to more moments of joy, more memories shared, and more years of living well. As Corbin sat at the dinner table, surrounded by the people he loved, he couldn't help but smile. The journey had been hard at times, yes, but it had also been incredibly rewarding. He had learned the greatest lesson of all, that it was never too late to take control of your health, and that the power to live well had always been within his reach. As the weeks turned into months, Corbin felt a deep shift in the way he approached life. His journey had begun with small, seemingly insignificant changes, replacing his coffee with healthier options, walking more, focusing on whole foods. But these changes were now a part of his everyday routine. What Corbin hadn't expected was the immense joy he would rediscover in the simplest moments. He had spent so many years caught up in the rush of life, in the chase for achievement, the need to stay busy, that he had forgotten how to truly live in the present. But now, with each step he took on his walks, with each meal he shared with his family, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. One Sunday afternoon, Corbin and his daughter decided to visit the nearby park. It had been a while since they had done something like this, just the two of them. The sun was warm and the park was quieter than usual. They found a bench by the lake where the gentle breeze ruffled the leaves of the trees and sat in comfortable silence. Corbin marveled at how much more he noticed now. The way the water glimmered in the sunlight, the sound of birds chirping in the trees, the scent of freshly mown grass. Before, he would have been too distracted by his coffee or his thoughts to take it all in. But now, everything felt more vivid, more real. I didn't realize how much I was missing all of this, Corbin said softly, turning to his daughter. It's like I've been running for so long I didn't see what was right in front of me. His daughter smiled, her eyes warm with affection. I'm so proud of you, Dad. It's not easy to make changes like you've made, but you've done it and you're living better for it. As they sat there, Corbin reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. It wasn't just about his health, it was about how he had reconnected with his own life. His daily habits now felt like they were leading him toward a fuller, more meaningful existence, one where he could enjoy each moment free from the constant need to keep up or push through. He wasn't looking for perfection, nor was he trying to undo years of habits overnight. He had simply embraced the idea that small, consistent choices could add up to a bigger transformation. The feeling of being present was something Corbin hadn't fully understood until now. He had spent much of his life thinking that the busier he was, the more productive, the better he was doing. But in reality, it was the quiet moments, the walks, the shared meals, the simple acts of kindness that brought him the most joy. His new lifestyle wasn't just about health in the traditional sense. It was about cultivating a life of gratitude, mindfulness, and connection. The health benefits were certainly there, but the emotional and mental clarity he was gaining was just as important. Later that evening, after they returned home, Corbin sat down with his family for dinner. They shared a quiet meal, talking about their day, about small victories, and even the occasional struggle. But there was a sense of ease in the room, a warmth that hadn't always been there before. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present, about showing up for each other in the ways that truly mattered. And Corbin realized that this was his new path, one that honored both his body and his soul. He had made the decision to change his health, but along the way, he had also rediscovered the importance of balance, the ability to slow down, to savor the little things, and to be grateful for what he had. It wasn't about achieving some ideal version of himself, it was about accepting who he was in this moment, with all his imperfections, and choosing to live fully anyway. And so, as Corbin looked around at the faces of the people he loved, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. He knew now that the true measure of success wasn't in how much you accomplish, but in how deeply you live. And for the first time in a long while, Corbin felt like he was truly living. Months had passed since Corbin made the decision to change his coffee habits, and the results were more profound than he could have ever imagined. His energy had remained steady throughout the day, his sleep had improved, and his physical aches, those little twinges that had become all too familiar, had almost completely disappeared. Corbin marveled at the difference, but the most surprising part was how this shift had affected his outlook on life. It was no longer about avoiding illness or managing symptoms, it was about living well and fully with a renewed sense of joy. One morning, after a particularly brisk walk, Corbin sat on his porch, a cup of green tea in hand, and reflected on how much had changed. His daughter came by, as she often did, bringing with her news of the grandchildren, a little extra cheer to brighten his day. She noticed how vibrant he seemed, his skin glowing, his posture straighter, and the way his eyes sparkled with a clarity he hadn't had in years. "You look great, Dad," she said, a knowing smile on her face. "I can't believe how much better you've been feeling." Corbin chuckled, looking down at his tea. "I feel better than I've felt in years. I think it's the combination of making small changes and sticking to them. I won't pretend it's been easy, but now that I'm seeing the results, it's hard to imagine going back." It wasn't just about the physical changes. The emotional and mental benefits had been just as striking. Corbin had discovered a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. In the past, he had been constantly caught in the cycle of doing more, always striving for the next goal, the next achievement, without ever stopping to consider if that was what truly fulfilled him. But now he was learning the art of slowing down, of savoring the present moment, and of finding joy in the simplicity of life. His son, Will, had noticed the change too. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Corbin shared how he had been feeling. "It's strange," he said. "I thought I was doing all the right things before, working hard, taking care of everyone, pushing through the fatigue. But now I see how important it is to rest, to eat well, and to just take care of myself. I didn't realize how much I was missing until I started giving myself permission to slow down." Will nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's incredible to see you like this, Dad. You've always been the one who did everything for us, but now you're showing us how important it is to take care of yourself too." As Corbin continued his journey of health and wellness, he found that the changes were not just physical, but deeply spiritual and emotional as well. His relationships with his family had deepened. They spent more time together, whether it was a walk in the park, a shared meal, or simply enjoying each other's company without the distractions of work or stress. They were living in the present together. One evening, after a long week, Corbin found himself sitting at the dinner table with his wife, Claire. As they ate, Corbin spoke softly. "I've been thinking about how far I've come," he said, his voice reflecting a mix of gratitude and humility. "It wasn't just about the coffee, it was about all the little changes I made that added up. It's like, I've found a way to live better." Claire, always his biggest supporter, took his hand. "You've worked hard for this, but it's been worth it, hasn't it?" Corbin smiled, looking around at his family. "It really has. I've never felt more alive, and I don't think it's just the change in diet. It's this feeling of being connected to my body, to you, and to everything around me. I'm learning how to live, not just exist." The journey wasn't over, and Corbin knew there would still be challenges ahead. But now, with each new day, he felt more equipped to handle whatever came his way. It wasn't about avoiding pain or discomfort. It was about accepting that these things were a part of life, and that he had the power to face them with resilience, clarity, and peace. As Corbin looked out at the setting sun, the gentle breeze blowing through the trees, he felt a deep sense of contentment. He had discovered something priceless, a life that wasn't defined by the next task, the next goal, or the next cup of coffee. Instead, it was defined by presence, by connection, and by the quiet joy of simply being. As Corbin continued his journey, it became clear that the small, consistent choices he was making every day were adding up to something much greater than he had ever anticipated. In the beginning, he had made changes out of necessity, driven by the warning from his doctor, his family's concerns, and his own growing fear for his health. But now, months later, it was no longer about fear, it was about strength. Strength that had come from his decision to take control, to embrace change, and to let go of habits that no longer served him. One quiet afternoon, as Corbin sat in the living room with his wife Claire, they found themselves in the middle of a conversation that had started to feel all too familiar. They were talking about the old days, reminiscing about their younger years, and Corbin couldn't help but smile. "I never thought I'd see the day when I'd choose a cup of green tea over coffee," he said, a playful laugh in his voice. Claire chuckled, nodding. "You've always been so attached to that cup of coffee. It's been a part of you for so long." Corbin paused for a moment, reflecting. It wasn't just about the coffee, though. It was about what it represented. The busy, hurried part of me that never stopped, never took a breath. I don't miss that anymore. I've learned that strength doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from taking care of yourself, from listening to your body and giving it what it needs, not what it wants in the moment. Claire looked at him, her expression soft. "I'm proud of you. You've really found a way to slow down and be more present. It's not always easy, but it's been so good for you." And Corbin knew that. He knew that his journey hadn't been easy, but every step had been worth it. He had learned something powerful through these changes, that true strength came not from fighting against his body, but from working with it, honoring it, and giving it the space to heal and thrive. It wasn't just the coffee, it was the way he had started eating, the vegetables and fruits that now made up the bulk of his meals. The way he had learned to move, slower, more intentionally, focusing on stretching, gentle walks, and even starting yoga at the suggestion of his daughter. It was these small choices, these quiet shifts in his daily routine that had begun to weave together into a larger, more fulfilling lifestyle. There were mornings when Corbin would wake up early to take a brisk walk, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs. He noticed how much more energy he had, how much more aware he was of the world around him. There were evenings when he and Claire would sit on the porch, simply enjoying the peace of the moment, something they had both craved but never fully appreciated before. The changes had crept in slowly, but now they were his new normal, and he couldn't imagine going back to the way things were. The shift wasn't just physical, it was emotional and mental as well. Corbin realized that his constant need for validation, for doing, had faded away. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone anymore, not even to himself. He had accepted that life wasn't about achieving more or living up to some standard. It was about living in the moment, about cultivating peace and balance, and about finding joy in the simple, everyday moments. As he sat there with Claire, reflecting on his progress, he couldn't help but feel proud, not just of the physical changes he had seen in himself, but of the way he had transformed his entire outlook on life. His health had improved, yes, but more than that, he had learned how to live better. He was no longer just going through the motions. He was present, mindful, and fully engaged in the life he was building. And in that moment, Corbin realized that the strength he had found wasn't just in the changes he had made, it was in the wisdom he had gained. The wisdom to slow down, to choose carefully, and to embrace the beauty of a life well lived, one small choice at a time. As the seasons changed, so did Corbin. His journey from the man who couldn't imagine starting the day without coffee to the man who now savored his morning tea felt like a lifetime ago. But as he reflected on the past year, he realized that the changes he'd made weren't just about avoiding risks. They were about embracing a new way of life, one that valued his health, his well-being, and his connection to the people around him. One afternoon, Corbin sat in his living room, surrounded by his family. It had become their tradition to gather every weekend, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. His daughter Will and the grandkids were all there, and as they sat together, Corbin couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. His decision to make healthier choices had brought him closer to them in ways he hadn't expected. They weren't just supporting him, they were walking this path with him. "Dad, you're looking better every time I see you," Will said, grinning. "You're glowing. Seriously, I think you got some kind of secret going on." Corbin smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "The secret is simple, really," he said softly. "It's about giving myself the time and space to really care for my health, not just in the way I eat or what I drink, but in how I live. I've learned that small changes add up, and in the end, they change everything." He paused, looking around the room at his family. "It's not just about avoiding the bad stuff anymore. It's about filling my life with the good things, the moments of peace, the walks, the time spent with all of you. I've learned that the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the gift of time. Time to slow down and truly appreciate what we have." Claire, who had been sitting quietly beside him, reached over and took his hand. "I've seen how much you've changed, Corbin. It's been beautiful to watch. Not just your health, but the way you look at life now. You're more present. You're more you." Corbin nodded, his heart swelling with love. "I think I've finally realized something I didn't understand before. We spend so much of our lives rushing, trying to fix ourselves or achieve something that we think will bring happiness. But happiness isn't something you chase, it's something you cultivate. It's in the small, everyday moments, the time you spend with the people you love, the quiet moments you allow yourself to savor." As the evening went on, Corbin realized that the changes he had made weren't just about his health, they were about his entire approach to life. He had learned to slow down, to listen to his body, and to enjoy the simple pleasures. He had learned that living well didn't require perfection or grand gestures, it just required small, mindful choices every day. Now, every morning, as Corbin sipped his tea or brewed a cup of filtered coffee, he took a moment to reflect on how far he had come. He didn't rush through his day, he didn't let the weight of the world push him into unhealthy habits. Instead, he lived intentionally, choosing to nourish his body, his mind, and his spirit. His mornings were no longer consumed with a sense of urgency or the need for caffeine. They were filled with calm, with gratitude, and with a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly live. And as Corbin sat there, surrounded by his family, he realized that this journey had given him more than just better health. It had given him a renewed perspective on life, a perspective that valued presence over perfection, connection over achievement, and peace over stress. He smiled softly to himself, knowing that the best part of this transformation wasn't just the physical changes, it was the newfound ability to embrace life fully, to live each day with intention, and to treasure the moments that truly mattered. As Corbin's journey comes to a close, it's clear that the changes he made went far beyond just his coffee habits. His transformation wasn't just about replacing a cup of coffee with tea or adopting healthier foods, it was about a complete shift in mindset. Corbin went from being a man who was constantly chasing after the next task, the next goal, to someone who embraced the beauty of slowing down and truly living in the present. His health improved, yes, but more importantly, his relationships deepened, and he found peace in the quiet moments that he had once overlooked. The most powerful transformation was his newfound ability to listen to his body, to make choices that honored his health, and to savor life's small pleasures. From walking with his family to simply sitting down for a meal without distraction, Corbin learned that true wellness isn't about perfection, it's about balance, intention, and presence. So, as you watch Corbin's story, ask yourself, what small changes can you make today to nurture your health and well-being? It doesn't have to be a drastic shift, it's the little things that add up. Whether it's swapping a daily habit or simply taking a moment to slow down, the power is in your hands. You deserve to live a life full of joy, connection, and peace, just as Corbin is now doing. Remember, the path to change doesn't have to be overwhelming. It's made of small steps, and each one brings you closer to the life you want to lead. So take a deep breath and know that your journey, just like Corbin's, is filled with endless possibilities. Embrace today and let tomorrow be the start of something even better.